Hello.
Yes.
I saw your tweet and I wasn't here for the beginning of the live, so I just wanted to ask how you think Marxism is Islam.
How is it not?
I mean, because there are parts of Marxism which, to be able to hold, you would have to compromise some of
Like
your
what?
Islamic metaphysics.
Like what?
Like, you can't be a materialist.
Yes, you can. Islam is materialist. It's 100% materialist.
Since when? You believe in jinn, you believe in angels, you believe in metaphysical forces that are
Okay.
not
And Muslims and
material.
Islam regards jinn and angels and all these other things not to be ideals that are floating somewhere, but actually real things that allow allow the believer to relate to the fundamental order of the cosmos. They are referring to different aspects of the order of the material cosmos. Material just means essential, okay? The materiality of something is the deeper reality behind something. The formatic level, the ideal level, is a transgression of Greco Roman pederastic philosophy, which Islam doesn't recognize. Now, there's some Islamic philosophers that dabbled in the Greek stuff, but that was never part of the religion. The people in the desert didn't care about that. So the
What
faith
do
is
you mean?
materialistic. When you're
I
talking
mean,
about
like,
jinns and you're talking about angels and all these things that are beyond empiricism, that's just an acknowledgement of material principles that are not empirically tangible. But Marxism also recognizes material principles that are not empirically tangible. For example, communism is not an empirically tangible thing. Classes are not empirically tangible. A mode of production, a modality of production is not empirically tangible. There's not a single measurable thing you can put in front of you and say, this is a mode of production, this is a class, and so on and so on. You can only define things on the basis of their relationships, their modalities, the patterns of how they reproduce themselves, and so on and so on. So Islam already acknowledges in its Marxist materialism is not empiricism. The Marxist materialism acknowledges and recognizes structuring and governing principles behind the material world. And Islam gives expression to similar principles, but with different language and in a different way. But that
so
doesn't
how
that
can
doesn't mean
you
it's at odds with materialism at
hold
all.
on? How can you fully hold that God is responsible for everything that happens in the
Mhm.
universe, and then also fully hold that the material conditions are responsible for anything that happens?
No,
Sorry,
Marxism
hold on. I'm
regards
not very sure which school
in
of thought you
Marxism
are.
in Marxism
So,
there is one material being. So there is one material being, and within this one material totality of being, this one material universe, there are material laws that govern the universe, right? That govern the development of the cosmos. So the category of the totality and the concrete within Marxism, if you take it at a universal or ontological level, implies God, actually. They didn't have a word for God because God was assumed to be an unreal abstraction of thought because Marx, coming from the Feuerbachian school and the young Hegelian school, is working backward from philosophy. Philosophy is beginning with the Platonic concept or the ideal, which is it's a receptacle of an unreal form. That's what form basically means for Plato. Something unreal that doesn't actually exist anywhere. It's not real, but it's like belongs to a transcendent realm, right? That can only be accessed by way of the intellect and by way of pure thought. And for Hegel,
that is a bit
everything
scary.
was downstream from that. So when Feuerbach understood that Hegelianism was just an alienated version of Christianity, when Marx was drawing from that, in his appraisal of religion, he was initially working with the scheme that religion
If
was
you're saying
just,
all this doesn't seem very materialist.
but materialism has nothing to do with empiricism. Materialism is a rejection of the formatic understanding of being, that being is a form, okay, that can only be accessed by means of one specific type of activity, thought, right? So the idea that thinking and being are the same, which I believe is from the Parmenides, from Plato, that is basically the fundamental purport of idealism, in a sense. The notion that the absolute and the ultimate being is some kind of thought. And the notion that the various distinctions and intelligibles and determinations with being are themselves concepts or reflections of concepts or correspond to concepts. And the Marxist view, the materialist view, rejects that. Materialism regards reality as actually the thing that's fundamental and primary, and ideation and thinking as secondary or reflective, right? But with respect to the question of an absolute being, it's not a question of whether the being is unreal or real, but whether it's absolute being. So, does Marxism presuppose the necessity of an absolute being? Absolutely. If there's a material integrity of the cosmos, if there's a material integrity of something that we call a universe, that means there has to be a fundamental principle of existence and reality. Okay, well, historically, that principle was just called God. That's what God referred
But why
to.
necessarily?
God did not
the
refer to a
Islamic
man
God?
in the sky who was wearing a robe, fiddling around doing X, Y, and Z. God is referring to the ultimate reality. If whether that reality is material or ideal is not the question, but actually religion
No, this
is
is the
materialist,
question.
because religion is actually the thing that asserts that reality is material. When philosophers try to say that that reality is an
You
ideal
can
reality,
say,
they're trying to make it accessible by means of the philosophical intellect, which culminates in a type of atheism that says man can become God or be equal to God. And Hegel actually kind of reproduces this, because Hegel talks about this idea of absolute knowledge. Well, absolute knowledge means that man, through his thinking, acquires parity and equality with the thinking and mind of God, in a way, right? But materialism is the thing that says, no, you can never actually achieve parity by way of the intellect or thinking with the absolute integrity of material being. It's always going to be something more fundamental than anything that can be reflected by thought. So by nature, Marxist materialism rejects shirk. It rejects idolatry. It rejects the idea that the material integrity of being can ever find fruition and satisfaction in any given determination, right? It says the whole thing in its integrity, in its totality, right, can never find full fulfillment in a single determination, in a single thing. And therefore, any idol of existence can't be reduced to it. It's always something more. So this is dialectical materialism.
so I just need to ask here. First of all, like supposing that what you said is true, why specifically does it have to be the Islamic God? Second of all,
What?
why specifically does it have to be the Islamic God?
Because
Why
only
can't
the
it be
Islamic
any
God,
like
only the
monotheistic God?
because only the Islamic God, because communism is the same thing as monotheism. Communism is about the more fundamental reality that conditions the division of labor. Polytheism states that each of the various divisions of labor exist unto themselves, right? Polytheism, for example, the worship of various different gods and deities, that's a reflection of the division of labor. So that's why in, for example, polytheistic religions like Hinduism, you have a caste society, because they reify and they turn the castes into these absolute, unchangeable categories, because it doesn't have a notion of a single reality we all share in common and before which we are all equal, right? So monotheism and communism are the same thing. But Marx's materialism is specifically monotheist because it recognizes one ultimate reality, one ultimate material reality. And the isthmus, which is what the Islamic mystical Sufi philosophers called it, or insan al-kamil, right, is man. For Marx, that is man. Man is the fundamental point of reference
Hold on.
before
Go
which
back to that.
all
What are you
thinking
saying?
must refer to an ultimate and fundamental, absolute, single reality, right? Marx's materialism is bounded up in his humanism of one universal man, one universal human reality, right? But
I mean, I
within the
don't feel like this
scheme,
is very necessary to Marxism, but
what?
I mean, okay. I said I don't feel like this is very necessary to Marxism, though.
Why not? No, but think
Like
about
you
it.
could
Think
think
about it.
this.
No, but think about it. Of course it's necessary. Where have the Marxists been The past 50 years, where's the
I don't know. You
revolution
tell me.
happening right now?
You tell me. Oh.
Think about
What
it.
do you mean by that?
Who are the real revolutionaries today, right now?
What do you like? You
Where are
mean
they?
Hezbollah and like
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, those guys?
Yes, they are. I mean, am I wrong? Who else is it? Tell me. Who else? Where are they? The last time there was a
I
Marxist
just like don't
revolutionary
really
was
understand.
Che Guevara was like the last Marxist revolutionary.
No, because Hezbollah and stuff, these guys are defending their territory.
Okay.
But if we look at what they're actually doing when their territory isn't being threatened, they're killing Sunni kids in Syria. So they're not really the Marxist revolutionaries.
But that's just propaganda.
But this isn't though, like
it's just propaganda. I hate to tell you, but it's propaganda. And also what they were doing in Syria was precisely defending their territory. It's a long-term strategic understanding of the defense of the region, defense of the supply chains that make the resistance possible in the first place. When Syria fell, the ability to defend not just the land of Lebanon, but everyone being able to defend their land from Israeli aggression became severely limited. So what they were doing in Syria was they were trying to preserve the integrity of that state and its territory so that it could continue having a seminal, fundamental strategic role in the facilitation of resistance. But in any case, there are plenty of things that are wanting of being defending, right? What about our human dignity? What about our human rights in some sense? What about our ability to have some kind of existence in the first place? We can't resist.
What I need to know.
We can't resist the global forces of the bourgeoisie. Marxists have failed. They failed to defend humanity from the global bourgeoisie for the past 50 or so years. They failed. So where are the real revolutionaries in the world today?
What I just need to know, like, why does it have to be the Islamic God and not some deistic God? And like, why do we have to say that the people who are the revolutionaries today, you take it that they're revolutionaries? Why do they have to be?
Because when we evaluate, because we can invent the deistic God right now.
Right.
We can invent and say, okay, it's some kind of deism. But then we would have to evaluate the question, okay, is there any kind of history whatsoever from this point all the way to the eternity of history? Is there any kind of tradition that might have beaten us to the chase? What is the actual content of Islam historically? What did it actually mean to the masses and masses of people? I mean, you can say deism, but there are logical consequences of deism when it comes to our understanding of being, or our ontology, our understanding of justice, of right and wrong. Okay, our understanding of how we respond to world history. So if you were a deist in the deserts of Arabia in this, the 8th or 7th century, your arc of history would not look that different from what Islam actually became. And throughout all of history, this is a tradition that has absorbed these various different
Islam is
cycles.
Like a specific thing.
What?
Islam is a specific thing. I mean, for
but
me,
it may be specific, but it's not arbitrary. It's not arbitrary.
Okay.
There's a rationale behind the content of Islam that is historically.
It has its own theology, like you.
But what is the But what is the theology based in? Like, what's the content of the theology? The content of theology is ultimately rooted. But all of that is downstream from a universalistic ontology and all the consequences of what it means to draw out a universalistic ontology.
I mean, I just know, like, Islam is very specific. It's much more specific than that. It goes.
Islam does not say we have to worship camels. It doesn't say we have to worship sandals. It doesn't say we have to worship sand. It doesn't say, oh, this specific thing, just arbitrarily we have to. No, there's a rhyme and reason behind everything. There's an exoteric and then there's an esoteric meaning behind everything.
All right. And that is true for Islam, and it's a really specific thing. Like, you can't take the supposed deistic God who will make your almost entire beliefs, like
By the
fiqh
way, it's
beliefs.
impossible it could be a deistic god of philosophy because that's a philosophical proposition. That's not an actual material relationship. If there's something called a material absolute, right? Absolute material integrity of being, then the history of the relationship to that being necessarily has to come before us in some kind of way. To say we just now have clarity with respect to what it is implies that we've discovered it by means of philosophy and by means of thought, which is an absurdity. That means it's a philosophical proposition, not actually an authentic revelation uh, uh, or
Well,
authentic
yeah, I mean,
relationship to material being by
if
means of
you, no, you're the
revelation.
one here who's logically deducing a god. So I'm saying,
No,
if we're
no.
gonna
I'm
be,
logically just pointing out the obvious fact that Marxism is Islam. That's all I'm doing. I'm just pointing out the obvious by means of logic. Actually, my meme goes viral all the time because everyone in their hearts intuitively knows it's true, but they lack the logical
but this
ability
just
to
isn't
justify why it's
true.
true.
And I mean, how
Most
can
people,
Islam?
if Marxism was not Islam, nobody would get affected by the meme that Marxism is Islam. The fact that it commands so much attention and interest from people shows to me that people know it's true deep down, but they lack the ability by means of consciousness and logic to justify why that is.
You don't think it's a little absurd to say that Islam's
Why?
guy is a kafir?
There's many absurd things you can say. None of them go viral, though, do they?
I mean, okay, but that doesn't really mean anything. And also, why would Marxism be Islam when Islam is like objectively like so reactionary?
How is Islam reactionary?
The patriarchal views and
Okay.
views on
So
homosexuality.
polytheism is progressive then?
No,
What is
but
progressive? Show me what's progressive then.
I'm saying you could just not hold the belief about God in the first place,
Where's the progressive atheism in the world?
or you could just not
So
subscribe to an organized
where's the
religion.
progress that the atheists have given us in the past 50 years? Where is it?
What do you mean by that?
Where are the progressive revolutionary atheists? Where are they?
Well, I'm not really talking to you about
Whoever's
history. I'm
saying
talking to
China,
you
no, they're
about.
not revolutionary. So no, you can't say China. China's not revolutionary. They ended the revolution after Mao. Now they've embarked on their own path, which I respect, but it's not revolutionary. So where are these progressive? Because to be progressive is to be revolutionary, right?
You can say that there's no other progressive alternative, but that doesn't make Islam progressive.
So no, but saying something is reactionary implies there's something progressive, right? Where's the progressive thing?
Well, there doesn't necessarily need to be a progressive religious belief. Like
Somebody's saying
it
convenient
doesn't
time
have
for
to
you
be
to
religious.
stop supporting China. That has nothing to do with China had its revolution. China's not sitting here saying it's offering the world a revolutionary path. China is saying we've had our own revolutionary path. Now we're in our Confucian society. We see no need to start a world revolution or something, and we're just going our own way. That's fine. That's well within their right. But I don't live in China. I live in America. So if we don't live in China, we can't import China's model, and the Chinese themselves don't tell us to import their model, by the way. Anyway, continue.
No, I'm like asking you a question. Like, do you not think that Islam is reactionary?
Of course it's not reactionary.
How?
Because to say Islam is reactionary implies that the polytheism it emerged against was progressive, which is ridiculous.
No, not necessarily the
So
polytheism
what is
it
it
emerged
reactionary with
against.
respect to? With respect to what? So let's talk about Afghanistan in the
With
70s and
respect to
80s.
all
You
ideas
can
that have been
say,
proposed in the history of humanity, okay?
what ideas? All of the progressive
Good.
ideas that came from the Middle East came from Islam.
Well, this isn't necessarily true. I
Yes, it
mean, we can
is.
see
All
the.
the advances in the sciences, for example, in mathematics, that was all within Islam.
Well, Avicenna in his time was called a kafir.
Okay, so was Jesus and his followers. They were called
No.
atheists. Yes, they were. The first Christians were called atheists by the Romans. Actually, Muslims were called atheists too. They were. It was
So
said
they
that
were
they
called
worshipped
disbelievers,
nothingness
but
because they didn't worship idols. So it was said they worshipped nothingness by their enemies.
at least I lived in a Muslim society. That's the difference.
Okay, so what? Why is it a given
I'm
that
saying that most of these
okay?
Islamic thinkers, they were
So
called Catholics.
was he channeling polytheism? What was he channeling that was somehow outside of Islam? Islamic societies that you're talking about persecuted Shia, they
I'm not
persecuted
saying he's a
Sufis,
Catholic. I'm not saying he's a
they
Catholic.
persecuted all manner of revolutionaries who were still working within the framework of Islam. But where were the revolutionaries who were outside of Islam? That's my question.
What is this a question? I mean, all of the revolutionaries were called Catholics.
They were called that, but did they themselves see themselves as outside of Islam?
Well, you could very well say that
What is
they
it?
were
Okay,
only saying they were Muslims to protect themselves.
even according to legalism, I'll explain why that's a no. But even according to the legalism, how is a Muslim defined?
You tell me.
You just say you're a
Because
Muslim.
I think we'll have different definitions.
You take the shahada, and you confess you're a
No, I'm
Muslim.
Muslim.
What?
I'm Muslim. I've been Muslim.
Yeah, but anyone who says that is considered a Muslim in the Muslim framework.
No, not necessarily. I mean, the Prophet,
That's the
peace be
rule.
upon him, says you can
Yeah.
do things that take you out of the fold
To
of
be
Islam.
a Muslim is to declare your faith as a Muslim. That's how you become a Muslim. So
No, but we know from the Hadith that there are things you can do that take you out of the fold of Islam. We know from the Quran as well.
the renunciation of belief.
So I can be a Muslim who doesn't pray my 5 times a day.
Yes, you can be a Muslim who doesn't follow any Muslim
No, you
rules.
can't.
Yes,
No,
you can.
because
You
we
can be
know
a
from the
Muslim who
Hadith
does
that you
not follow
can.
any. You can absolutely be a Muslim who doesn't follow any of the rules.
Well, if you can do anything and be a Muslim, then yeah, sure, you can say that Marxism is Islam, but it wouldn't be Islam that's true to the Quran and the Hadith.
Hold on. You're talking about two different things. You're talking about Islam as a legalistic tradition, which not all Muslim sects have even agreed upon, and yet you can't say that they're outside of Islam, versus Islam as it actually materially was historically. For example, various Sufi traditions that emerged from the time of revelation up to this point had very different views about the so-called 5 pillars of Islam. They have very different interpretations about the nature of the legalisms. And they still regarded themselves as within the Islamic tradition. And there's no other tradition we can locate them within.
As within it doesn't make you within it.
According to who? Who's making the rules? Saudi Arabia? Tell me who makes the rules. No, the sick truth is that the people who made the rules were the people who had power. They were the people who had the monopoly on violence. That's it. They made the rules. Who defines what it really is and what it isn't?
So you're saying the rules of your religion were made up by the people who had power. I mean, does this sound okay to you to say?
Yes, it does. Because you know why? Because Islam, when we use this word Islam, we're talking about a fundamental type of belief, which is supposed to be a pure relationship between the individual and God, the absolute, right? So
No, it's much more than
absolutely. Islam is a relationship between the individual and God.
No, it's much more than that.
Nope.
I mean, how can you say that when there's Sharia law?
Because human beings can interpret it however they want to interpret it.
So you don't believe in Sharia?
I don't believe in what?
Sharia?
Communism is Sharia.
So,
The Soviet Constitution of 1936 was Sharia.
So you do believe in Sharia?
The true Sharia, yes.
Okay, so how can you say that God's command can be imposed on another, and then say that it's the relation between the individual and God?
Because making reference because the authority of Islam does not come from hiding behind the skirt of conventions and habits. The authority of Islam comes from the struggle, the jihad, right, for a concrete relationship between justice, injustice, oppressor, oppressed, right and wrong, truth and falsehood. In Islam, everything that is true belongs to Allah, right? Now, there's two ways of looking at religion. You see, the true way to look at religion is not, here are the set of rules and bullet points from Microsoft PowerPoint. It's not an Excel sheet, okay? The way to look at a religion is, what fundamental relationship do I have to the very logos, the very fundamental rationale behind all of these different interpretive traditions that came about in the first place? What active living faith doesn't say, oh, this is the rule, that's it. Active living faith says, here's the fundamental relationship I have to the absolute, for which X, Y, and Z law and rule is actually rational and necessary.
Okay. Like, how does this relate? I mean, I asked you how, like, you can believe in imposing Sharia on other people, and then also believe that
what is Sharia?
religion is
What does Sharia mean? Go ahead, translate it.
the divine command of Allah for how we govern.
Translate the etymology. What is Sharia?
Means law.
Translate it. Find the etymology. Just
What do you
Google
mean?
it. Google the etymology of Sharia.
I speak Arabic.
So give me the etymology of Sharia.
What do you mean? It means
Look up etymology of Sharia.
Yeah, hold on. Can we go back to something that
No,
you said?
the etymology of Sharia. Give me the etymology of Sharia.
What answer do you want me to give?
Just look up etymology of Sharia.
And read it out to you?
Yes.
Okay. Give me a second. It says, Sharia is the body of divine religious law in Islam that serves as...
The etymology. The etymology.
I said etymology. It's
E-T-Y.
I know how to spell etymology.
So read out the etymology of Sharia.
Comes from Arabic, translating literally to the path leading to the water.
There we go. The pathway to water. Why is the law of God, why does the etymology referring to the law of God mean the pathway to water? Why is that? Do you know?
You tell me.
Because in the Islamic ontology, okay, you have the relationship between the fire, okay, the earth. Fire is the extreme of the air, right? Because you have the deadly scorching fire in the desert that comes from hot air, right? When it burns. In the framework of Islam, water is a dialectical mediation of these two ontological principles, right? Which is the way of fire being in reference to the, kind of intangible, the spiritual realm, right? And earth being the grounded material world. Water is the dialectical sublation of both. And so the way to water is the same thing as dialectical materialism. A law based on the principle of dialectical materialism. Absolutely the truth. Dialectical materialism is at the foundation of Sharia. Sharia means dialectical materialism. That's all it means.